In this video, I'm going to backport Lugia and Ho-Oh into Pokemon Yellow and see how they do in solo challenges. These are the playthrough rules, you can also find them in the description. Okay, backporting these Pokemon comes with some unique challenges, but before we get to those, let's talk about the move pools. Each one of these Pokemon has their own signature move starting in Generation 2. Aeroblast for Lugia and Sacred Fire for Ho-Oh. Because of the rules I have for this series, I will be trying to faithfully backport these moves into Generation 1. That said, the mechanics around the moves are going to change just slightly because Aeroblast is going to rely on the Generation 1 crit mechanic, meaning due to Lugia's high base speed, it is always going to get critical hits. Sacred Fire, on the other hand, I had to do a little bit of coding in order to implement correctly so that it has a 50% chance to burn because there are no moves in Generation 1 that have this same chance. Fire Blast has a 30% chance and moves like Ember and Flamethrower have a 10% chance. There are two downsides to these powerful starting moves. They each have 100 base power, which is incredible, but they only have 95% accuracy and 5 PP. So I anticipate that today I'm going to run into some serious constraints due to my small PP. Now let's look at their level up learn sets from Generation 2. As you can see, these Pokemon learn moves at multiples of 11. They both learn Safeguard, Gust, Recover, Swift, Whirlwind, Ancient Power, and Future Sight, with only 3 moves being substituted out. The starting move, Aeroblast or Sacred Fire, and then the 2 moves that they learn at level 44 and 55. For Ho-Oh, it's Fire Blast and Sunny Day, and for Lugia, it's Hydro Pump and Rain Dance. This is a moment where I'm going to remind everyone that despite the jokes I have made in my previous videos, Lugia is a Psychic Flying type. I guess it's my favorite typing, it's also Venomoth's type, but remember, it is not a water type, despite what its move pool is trying to suggest to you. Ho-Oh, on the other hand, gets the same type attack bonus with its elemental moves, so that gives it a small advantage in terms of move pool. Now in Generation 1, Pokemon didn't learn more than 7 moves on their set, so I'm not going to give these Pokemon a bunch of additional moves. I'm going to eliminate Safeguard entirely, move Gust to a secondary level 1 move. I think this is what the developers would have done in Generation 1. If you look at Pokemon like Zapdos, Articuno, and Moltres, here are their Generation 1 learn sets, you can see that they start with 2 moves. So for Lugia and Ho-Oh, it made the most sense to give them their signature move as they have in Generation 2, and then Gust, the first damage dealing move that they learn through level up. If we continue looking at the Legendary Birds sets, the Legendary Birds from Generation 1 I mean, you will see that they don't learn any moves until later into the game because they were meant to be obtained at level 50. Lugia and Ho-Oh are both obtainable at level 40, so this is going to be the level that I assumed the player would obtain them. As a result, I'm going to start giving them moves at level 44. Recover and then Hydro Pump for Lugia. After that, both of them will have Swift, Whirlwind, Rock Throw as a replacement for Ancient Power, and then Psychic as a replacement for Future Sight. Ho-Oh, on the other hand, is going to have Fire Blast at level 55, so that covers their level up sets. In order to figure out which TMs and HMs they should learn in Generation 1, I look at 3 resources. The Generation 2 TM and HM learn set, the Generation 3 TM and HM learn set, and then the Generation 3 move tutor list. Collecting that information gives Lugia a wide range of coverage through TM and HM. All 3 water type moves, both ice type moves, Mega Drain, which is surprising, all 3 electric type moves, Earthquake, Psychic, Sky Attack, and Fly. Ho-Oh, on the other hand, is a little bit more limited. It gets Mega Drain and Solar Beam, all 3 electric type moves, Earthquake, Psychic, Sky Attack, and Fly, but it lacks the ice type coverage and the water type coverage. And it's also missing another move. In Generation 1, Body Slam essentially becomes Body Spam because this move is so fantastic as a go-to normal type move throughout the mid-game. But as you can see here on Ho-Oh's Generation 3 tutor set, it does not get access to Body Slam. The move tutors in Generation 3 were introduced as a way to add in the TMs that were removed from Generation 1, because the remakes Fire Red and Leaf Green use the TM and HM learn set from Ruby and Sapphire, so they don't have moves like Body Slam available to the player. So using this list, you can see what the developers thought those Pokemon should have in terms of Generation 1 TMs. Now if we go to Lugia's Gen 3 tutor set, you can see that it does get Body Slam. So definitely in terms of level up move pool, Ho-Oh came out ahead, but in terms of TM and HM set, Lugia is ahead. And Lugia is also going to take a point in terms of typing. Fire Flying is pretty bad in Kanto for a couple of reasons which will become evident throughout the playthrough. Both of these Pokemon have slow growth rates, which is not good for a solo challenge, and this is where we get to the complication of backporting these 2 Pokemon. Let's look at their base stats. Ho-Oh has 106 HP, 130 attack, 90 defense, 110 special attack, 154 special defense, and 90 speed. The only value shared between these 2 Pokemon is the 106 HP, but then beyond that, all of the other stats are shuffled around. Lugia has 90 attack and special attack, attack, 130 defense, 154 special defense, and 110 speed. It's pretty easy to see what the developers had going on here. They have a base stat total of 680. They are shuffling around 2 allocations of 90, 1 allocation of 110, 1 allocation of 130, and 1 allocation of 154, which interestingly enough is the same special attack that Mewtwo has. And if you take the time to look at Mewtwo's stats, you can see what's going on here. Mewtwo has the exact same stat allocation quantities, again just shuffled around to make it different from Lugia and Ho-Oh. For this backport series, this presents me with an interesting dilemma. If I want Lugia and Ho-Oh to have the same base stat total as Mewtwo has in Generation 1, then I'm not going to be able to pull that off if I delete one of their special attack or special defense stats. Also, if I want Lugia and Ho-Oh to have the same base stat total as each other in Generation 1, then I also can't take this approach. I would need to invent a new stat quantity in order to pull this off. In Generation 1, Mewtwo has a base stat total of 590 because it doesn't have its 90 special defense stat. If I do the exact same thing with Lugia and omit its special defense stat, then its base stat total is 526. And it also misses out on an allocation of 154, which feels fundamentally unfair. I don't think the developers would have made a legendary Pokemon like this that underpowered. With Ho-Oh, just like Lugia, if we omit the special defense, then it comes out to the same base stat total of 526. But once again, it feels a little bit unfair because Ho-Oh is not getting the 154 stat allocation. Now, you might think this is the most fair approach going forward, but I didn't really like this. I want to play the game today with 2 fundamentally broken and overpowered Pokemon. So I am instead going to give Ho-Oh and Lugia their 154 special defense as their special attack stat. This is assuming that going into Generation 2, both of these Pokemon would have been nerfed, with their special attack receiving a lower value. This does solve a different problem. Lugia now has a base stat total of 590. It is the same as Mewtwo in Generation 1. But by giving Ho-Oh the more favorable stat spread in terms of special, it doesn't quite make it to 590, instead only having 570. This is because it has no allocation of 110 in its base stats, instead having 90 in both defense and speed. Looking back on this, I probably could have just given it 110 speed, but no Pokemon from Generation 1 going into Generation 2 had their speed quantities altered, so it didn't feel like this was in the spirit of my backport series, and I've never done something like that before. This is the decision I decided to go with. I hope everyone can live with it. Now, let's get into these solo challenges. I'm going to start with Lugia because it has the worst matchup against Brock. Aeroblast is a physical move that is going to be resisted by Brock's Pokemon. Plus, again, I will emphasize the fact that this move only has 5 PP. Once I run out, I'm going to have to rely on Gust. Now, the upside here is that Aeroblast is always going to be getting critical hits, but we need to remember that in Generation 1, the critical hit modifier is determined by the Pokemon's level, and at low levels, the critical hit multiplier is dramatically lower. It approaches 1.8 around level 20, and then by the time you're like 90, 95, the critical hit multiplier is around 1.95. Just so you can track the relative damage of Aeroblast, in the top left I have made the effective power displayed there calculate in the critical hit multiplier that is currently in place. So as my Lugia levels up, you will see the damage of Aeroblast also slightly increase. Lugia can level up fairly quickly in the early game because it one-shots all the bugs in the forest, but I can't train against too many of them, otherwise I'll run out of Aeroblast PP. I fight the second bug catcher who has 2 Metapod and 1 Caterpie for decent experience yields, and then the mandatory bug catcher heading into Pewter City after that. Inside the gym, I battle the junior trainer defeating his Diglett and Sandshrew for experience. This brings Lugia up to level 9, 1 level under a damage rounding threshold. Also, before I fight Brock, I'm gonna have to waste a little bit of time backtracking to the Pokemon Center in order to restore my PP. Nurse Joy always does a great job of taking care of me, but I really don't want to be wasting time going back to visit her over and over again in a speed run. Okay, so at level 9, let's see if Lugia is capable of defeating Brock. Geodude is first. I go for Aeroblast, and it's going to be a 3-hit, even though it's critting every single time. Because of this, I want to save 3 Aeroblasts for the Onix, which has much more defense. I'm going to chip away at the Geodude and knock it out using Gust, which is quite slow. But Lugia, with 110 base speed, does have a 21.48% chance to crit with regular moves, so it scores one of those, speeding it up just a little bit. Onix is next, and there is a problem here. Even though I am faster, the Onix can go for Bide, and there is no way for me to delay without taking damage when it unleashes energy. Luckily, I can take minimal damage using Gust, dealing what looks like 1 hit point of damage every turn. Now I get quite unlucky here when I run out of Aeroblast PP because my last use of the move misses. That prevents Lugia from getting ideal damage against the Onix, and I have to slowly knock it out from almost half health. This takes a while. It actually takes too long, and Onix ends up knocking Lugia out first. Next time around, Aeroblast does not miss against the Onix. Because of this, I have enough health and I'm able to knock it out. This is a fine Brock split, but it's not really legendary. Anyway, the early game is going to start being less frustrating very soon. I do have to make my way through Route 3, which I wish I had more Aeroblast PP for. Even if Gust was a flying type move, it would be very helpful here because it would have super effective damage against the Bug Catcher's Pokemon. Plus, it would also get the same type attack bonus, helping to speed this section of the game up. Of course, I'm not going to go back to the Pokemon Center to heal during this section of the game. I'm just going to use Gust to get through. Then, once I get to Mount Moon, I'm going to get a moveset upgrade because Lugia can learn the Water Gun TM. This is a case where Lugia is now going to be able to utilize the higher special stat when compared with its attack stat. You might think this is unfair because Lugia is supposed to be a defensive Pokemon. It's not supposed to be able to utilize special this well. And if you're thinking that, I want you to look at a bunch of design choices made in Generation 1, like for example Magneton. This is supposed to be a defensive Pokemon, but it ends up just being ridiculously good attacking with Thunderbolt. I do a little bit of extra training inside of Mount Moon, although I don't think it's required. The Super Nerd over by the Rare Candy is pretty good experience, and I also fight the Hiker just because it can one-shot all of his Pokemon using Water Gun. This is also a first playthrough in Yellow version where I have encounters turned on. I turn them off in subsequent runs just to make sure the rankings are as fair as possible. Whenever Lugia comes across a Geodude, I just knock it out quickly with Water Gun for a little bit more experience. All of this extra training brings me up to level 16 before I head into Cerulean City. I think it makes much more sense to face Misty right away to access Bubble Beam for Nugget Bridge. Plus, Lugia's current moveset stacks up very well against her team. Staryu's up first, I crit with Aeroblast and get the one-shot. Now, I said Lugia stacks up well against Misty for a reason. She likes to use X-Defend and Harden on the Starmie, and my crits from Aeroblast are going to bypass these changes. She uses X-Defend on turn 1, I do more than half to Starmie, then it attacks with Water Gun, doing pathetic damage to my specially defensive beast Lugia. So I hope you can see here, there's nothing Misty can do to me. With one more Aeroblast, that's that for her. Now that I have Bubble Beam, the rival on Nugget Bridge is very simple. I always say that this battle is straightforward if you have access to a special attack. He's really only difficult if you're relying on exclusively physical moves, like last week with Tauros. That run wasn't fun here. In this case, I one-shot all of his Pokemon with the exception of the Eevee. I probably should have used Aeroblast against it. Bubble Beam still gets the job done in 2 turns though. Heading out onto Nugget Bridge, let's talk about Lugia. I think this Pokemon has the potential to be one of the best Pokemon I have used so far in Yellow version. It has quite literally Mewtwo tier stats. Its coverage is fantastic, and its typing is quite good. Although I think Mewtwo's mono-psychic typing is just a little bit better. It isn't weak to electric, rock, or ice moves like Lugia is, and ice moves are actually pretty prominent in Yellow version. Lugia's flying typing does remove the weakness to bug, but hopefully you've realized that that's not really an advantage that Mewtwo has in Yellow version. There are only 3 bug moves, and 2 of them do damage. Both of them are trash, and they very rarely even make a single appearance in playthroughs. Like, Koga's Venomoth is going to attack with Leech Life on Mewtwo, but that doesn't really matter when it's not even a bug type. All of Nugget Bridge is easy as you're seeing. Also, Sandy's Pokemon on my way to Vermilion City are all one-hits using Bubble Beam, so I don't even have to risk using Aeroblast against them. On the SSN, I decide to play safe, picking up the Rest TM. I probably should have skipped this. It's a little bit similar to the training I was doing in Mount Moon. I don't think it's necessary with a Pokemon like Lugia, and it's probably something I'll be able to cut from my follow-up run. I pick up Body Slam next. This is going to be helpful. It's a great replacement to Gust. The rival here is very straightforward, so now let's go up against Lieutenant Surge. This is one place where Lugia stacks up poorly against a trainer in Yellow version where Mewtwo would do much better. Although, maybe this is not an advantage for Mewtwo because we all know how Surge is. He has one Pokemon, it's Raichu. It never likes to use Thunderbolt. I go for Body Slam, it misses Mega Kick. My second Body Slam takes it to low health. Then it uses Mega Punch, getting a critical hit. Not nice for Surge though, it doesn't do nearly enough damage, and with that I defeat the Electric type specialist. That's a third split of 16 minutes and 35 seconds. Okay, let's switch over over to Ho-Oh now. I'm just quickly going to mention the sprites I'm using for this. The front sprites are directly ripped from Generation 2, so that's Game Freak's work, and the back sprites are downscales of the Generation 2 back sprites that I did in a pixel editing software on my iPad. By the way, it is a really calming way to go to sleep, just working on sprites in bed, sitting next to my wife. I love it. I do it pretty much every night now, which is one of the reasons there are more and more of these backport videos on my channel. I really enjoy the entire process of putting these together. Okay, let's talk about something I find really ironic. Lugia, the diving Pokemon, which is supposed to be like the master of the sea, which you find in the Whirl Islands, which is at sea, around a bunch of water. Lugia is literally surfing on the water when you find it by a giant waterfall, is not a water type Pokemon, and struggles against Brock, the rock type specialist. That's where it got its first reset. Now, Ho-Oh, the fire flying type, which has a double weakness to rock type moves, meaning it takes 4 times damage from them, and its primary attacking type in the early game, the fire type, is resisted by rock type Pokemon. However, in Generation 1, rock type Pokemon are essentially weak to fire type moves because they all have trash special stats. In this case, Ho-Oh is the Pokemon that has an advantage against Brock in the early game. I fight less trainers, only the mandatory bug catcher in the forest, and I skip the junior trainer inside of Brock's gym, going up against the rock type specialist at level 6. Recently I've been thinking about making a Pokemon Yellow ROM hack that is essentially just going to make the game more difficult, in subtle ways. I think one of the subtle ways you could make Brock much more difficult is removing a move like Screech from his set or Tackle and giving him Rock Throw instead. Also, if he had good AI, imagine what he would do to Ho-Oh. But in this case with Sacred Fire, I can do a lot of damage to his Pokemon. At only level 6, the Geodude takes almost half. There's some downside here. I'm going to have to knock it out with Gust so that I save some extra PP for the Onix. That said, there's another type of upside. The 50% chance to burn with Sacred Fire means that his Geodude's attack stat gets halved. You can see its attack stat dynamically updating in the top right. If you watch it, when he uses his full heal, because Brock has 5 of these per Pokemon, the attack stat does not recover. This is a Generation 1 quirk that applies to both Paralysis and Burn. So now his Geodude can do no damage with Tackle essentially, and I can knock it out with Gust slowly. Now, I don't really need to burn the Onix that's next because its attack stat is already terrible. Although it goes for Bide, and I miss my Sacred Fire at this moment, which is kind of a good thing, I guess. It's not going to deal damage to me. I chip away with Gust, take little damage from Bide, then go for Sacred Fire and it uses Bide again. Ho-Oh is slower than Onix in this case. However, this Sacred Fire burns Onix. Brock cannot use a full heal while Bide is currently active. As a result, Onix takes burn damage and chip damage from Gust, getting knocked out before it unleashes energy. Okay, Ho-Oh, well done. Minimum battles Brock. By the way, if you want to play these challenges yourself, check out the Discord link in the description. I am posting all of the patches for my backports there so you can play them yourself. Also, I have updated my overlay software so that you should be able to play these runs with all of the visuals that I have here on my channel. If you're wondering if you can post your own videos using my overlay, please go ahead. I would love to see more solo challenge content on this platform in general or on other platforms. Okay, Ho-Oh also would benefit from a flying type Gust over the next section of the game, and it has a disadvantage once it arrives in Mount Moon, because unlike Lugia, it cannot get Water Gun, so it still has to rely on Sacred Fire and Gust. And that's where we really need to look through its move pool and see what the next move it's going to learn is. Through level up, it has to wait to level 44. On the other side of Mount Moon, I could potentially pick up the Whirlwind TM, which has no effect during trainer battles, so obviously that's not going to be my next choice. I don't get access to Bubble Beam, I don't get access to Body Slam, so after I defeat Surge, Ho-Oh is going to get Thunderbolt. But it's going to be a long section of the game until then, because I have to go up against Misty before I can cut the tree to get into Surge's gym. Sometimes people recommend to me that I should fight Surge first and then go back to Misty after. You cannot do it in that order, it is impossible. The Cascade badge is required to fight Surge. The only potential I have for sequence breaking is going to Bill's house and then going to Vermilion City, exploring the entire SSN, before backtracking to Misty's gym and fighting her at a higher level. With bad fire type Pokemon, this is definitely the right choice. With good fire type Pokemon, sometimes you can fight Misty right away with better moves. But as we just established, Ho-Oh is not really going to get any of those. Although that's not entirely true. Obviously I'm doing Nugget Bridge first. The rival was very trivial, we don't need to talk about him. At the end of this section of the game, after picking up the HM user Charmander, I'm also going to grab the item ball next to him, which is the TM for Thunder Wave. I very rarely use this in my solo challenges. I try to utilize it a lot more at the beginning of this series, but I haven't really found a good niche for it. Although in this case, I think it could help Ho-Oh, like at least I have a third move that might potentially cut Misty's Starmie's speed and make it miss sometimes. Still though, I only have Gust as an attacking move, so by the time I am heading back to Cerulean City, I wasn't feeling confident fighting Misty right away. Instead, I'm going to go to Vermilion City, explore the SS Anne, defeat some extra trainers here before defeating the rival. This brings Ho-Oh almost up to level 22, and it is still not faster than Misty's Starmie. Now that the SS Anne has departed, I go to Route 11 to do some additional training. Ike the Killer did this with Charmander, and I eventually incorporated that into my own route. Here with Ho-Oh, I think it'll also be useful. I can train on this Engineer who has 2 Magnemite and 1 Magneton. They give pretty good special attack stat experience, which will be helpful for Ho-Oh later into the run. This battle alone isn't enough experience. It gets me to 22, but not to 23. I fight one more trainer, this Gambler. That brings Ho-Oh up to level 23, and now it has more speed than Misty's Starmie. Against the Staryu, I use Sacred Fire. This seems like the wrong choice, but even though it's not very effective, it still will do more damage. Now, I burn, and Staryu is also doing very little damage with Water Gun because of Ho-Oh's ridiculous special stat. Maybe I could have just fought Misty right away and survived all of her attacks. I could just utilize Thunder Wave for the speed and save a bunch of additional training. I'm still going to utilize Thunder Wave here just to cut the Starmie's consistency. I go for Sacred Fire after that, getting a critical hit, which does more than half. Misty uses an X Defend, and then Sacred Fire knocks out her ace. Okay, as far as Fire-type battles against Misty goes, this one was really easy. Surge is next. Check out this 9001 IQ play. X speed, followed by Growl. Well done. This win gives Ho-Oh the Thunderbolt TM. At long last, a move that doesn't have 5 PP and deals special damage. Now hopefully for Ho-Oh, you can see what the problem is coming up very soon. It's not the Wrapping Lass. It's not this Pokemaniac, although I do have to say his Cubone is a bit annoying. I have to either use Sacred Fire or Gust on any ground type Pokemon that I'm facing. That's just the inflexibility of having to rely on an electric type move. The real problem comes near the end of Rock Tunnel against the self-destructing Hiker. Let's go through his team. All of these Pokemon know Rock Throw, which does 4 times damage and has an effective power of 300. I am going to have to rely on Sacred Fire for this fight, and it only has 5 PP plus a 5% chance to miss. If I am not one-hitting his Pokemon, things could go very badly. Luckily, Sacred Fire crits the first Geodude. Okay, we don't know about damage ranges yet. Then against the second one, it does not get a critical hit, but the Rock type still goes down. Last is Graveler. I go for Sacred Fire, and it does enough damage because of a critical hit. I think I needed it for that one. Okay, self-destructing Hiker's out of the way. I didn't get hit by Rock Throw once. That's really great. Now Ho-Oh can move into the mid-game. South of Lavender Town, let's pick up the TM for Swift. Finally a better normal type move. Because both of these Pokemon have slow growth rates, I think picking up the rare candy in the hideout makes the most sense for a first playthrough, especially with Ho-Oh. There are so many theoretical issues for it in the late game: Giovanni's Rhydon, Lorelai's entire team, and Lance's Gyarados. I want to ensure that by the time I get there, I'm not going to have like 14, 15 resets on one battle, losing a ton of time. Inside the department store, I purchased Calcium. This makes most sense for both of these Pokemon. It's both improving them defensively and offensively. One more thing before Ho-Oh moves on with the next stage of the game, and this is a major upgrade. I can journey to Saffron City, pick up the Psychic TM, and teach this in the place of Thunder Wave. Now, Ho-Oh's moveset is looking much better. The rival in Pokemon Tower is completely simple. Also, all of the ghosts here just go down to a single hit from Psychic. It's no problem. Instead of going to Cycling Road next, I'm gonna go for Erica. I could have fought her before the department store and maybe afforded one more vitamin, although I typically don't like to do that. I always want to have Fly by the time I'm fighting her, so I don't have to walk back from her gym, because it does involve one cut tree that I don't want to cut for a second time. Her team is trivial. I have Sacred Fire. I one-shot all 3 of them, luckily not missing. On Cycling Road, I skip a bunch of the usual training, fighting only the biker boss for good experience yields. Fuchsia City Gym is my next destination. In here, I'm only going to fight minimum battles. I think that Ho-Oh has everything it needs to completely stomp Koga right now. Venonat 1 is a one-shot with Psychic. Venonat 2 is a one-shot with Sacred Fire, and so is Venonat 3. But what does Koga have for us now? He has a water-type Venomoth. I'm terrified. Actually, it's a water-rock type. It's like Corsola. You have to be very careful. Luckily, it doesn't have any rock-type moves. So in this case, it just goes for Toxic, and Ho-Oh knocks it out over 2 turns. Back to Lugia now. It also gets Thunderbolt, so in the next section of the game, it's going to have absolutely no issues. Aeroblast against grass types, Bubble Beam against ground types, Thunderbolt against the water type Slowpokes, which usually slow runs down, and then I have Bubble Beam for the self-destructing Hiker. Things just get more complicated from here because Lugia's move pool is so stacked. In the department store, I pick up the TM for Ice Beam, which I could teach right now if I really wanted to, and it probably makes the most sense, so I'm going to put it in the place of Bubble Beam, letting go of the water type move for now. I'm also of course going to go to Saffron City and pick up the TM for Psychic, which gets the same type attack bonus with Lugia, another advantage it has over Ho-Oh. I spent some time at the beginning of the game talking about how Body Slam is an advantage for Lugia, but really only in a small section of the game, just before Surge until right here, because I'm going to teach Psychic in its place, going to an all-special set with the exception of Aeroblast. I do think holding onto it long-term is the best play with Lugia because I need physical damage against some key late-game threats. Rival in Pokemon Tower, easy. Ghastly in Pokemon Tower, extra easy. Erica after doing the Safari Zone and Cycling Road, over easy, I guess? In this case, I have Aeroblast and I one-shot all of her Pokemon. I did miss on the Gloom, so it did damage to Lugia. Oh no, Acid. I'm so scared. Just like Ho-Oh, I head to Koga's gym next. I have Psychic for all of the Venonats. I could use Aeroblast here, I guess, but it just has a chance of missing, and I really don't want to chance that, especially when the Venomoth sets up Double Team. In this case, though, Lugia gets a critical hit with Psychic and one-shots. Now, it might seem like I'm rushing through the next sections of the game, but what's really happening is both of these Pokemon have so few things that they need to do. They essentially just skip from Major Battle to Major Battle to Major Battle. Just before the Rival in Sylph, I pick up the Earthquake TM with Lugia. I don't know if this is going to be useful. Maybe I'll need it for the champion's Magneton. Now the Rival does have it in Sylph, but it doesn't know Thunderwave yet, so it's not really that scary. Ice Beam one-shots the Sandslash, Thunderbolt one-shots the Cloyster. I two-shot the Magneton using Psychic. It goes for Thundershock, getting a critical hit, doing almost half to Lugia. Impressive damage. After that I have Kadabra. This is the Pokemon I want Aeroblast for. After that is Flareon. Now I could have taught Surf, but Earthquake would be the better choice because Flareon has really great special. You usually don't want to be attacking it with water type moves. For that purpose, I use my physical move Aeroblast, and with a critical hit, I knock it out in 1 turn. Lugia is level 38 against Sabrina. Because of this, it is slower than the Alakazam, but Aeroblast is also helpful here. I can one-shot the Abra and the Kadabra and move on to her Ace very consistently. Now, if she uses an X-Defend or Reflect, I will essentially just get a free knockout because I think Aeroblast will have enough damage. She goes for the X-Defend, and yes, I was right, Aeroblast does have enough damage, so the Alakazam doesn't do anything to Lugia. And honestly, what could it even do? Psywave would have been its most damage-dealing move. Okay, we're gonna roll an intro now because we need to hype up Blaine. I try to do it in all of my videos. He's terrifying in yellow version. Let's see how he goes when I refuse to teach Lugia Surf or Earthquake. I'm going to justify my decision making here right before we see any of this battle. Aeroblast is pretty good against his Pokemon, and Psychic is also pretty good because it has a 33% chance to lower special. I'm able to two-shot the Ninetales, and it really isn't problematic. Next is Rapidash, and I was very surprised here when Psychic does not get the 2-hit. This leaves it on a sliver of health, allowing Rapidash to attack with 1 takedown, which gets a critical hit, leaving Lugia on 27 hit points. Because of that, Blaine's final Pokemon comes out. I go for Psychic, it does about a third, and then Arcanine uses Takedown, finishing Lugia. That's my second reset. This is another ironic one. Lugia, the Guardian of the Seas, has lost to Brock and Blaine. It's not going to happen again though. This time without critical hits and the fact that I two-shot the Rapidash, I'm easily able to make it by Blaine. Also, the Arcanine is incompetent here. It uses Reflect 2 times in a row as my Lugia spams Psychic, using special damage against it. Okay, I'm going to save the Giovanni intro and we'll just go into it right away with Lugia. It's not going to have as many problems here as Ho-Oh will, potentially at least. Remember, the Rhydon has Rock Slide. My current set does not have a water type move, so I'm mostly relying on Ice Beam and Psychic for these Pokemon. I go for Aeroblast to two-shot the Persian. It does squeeze in a slash, taking Lugia down, still to green health, but just above half. Ice Beam is not able to one-shot the Nidoqueen, but Giovanni uses a guard spec. Then Psychic one-shots the Nidoking. I definitely should have been using this against Nidoqueen as well. That leaves only the Rhydon. I go for Ice Beam. It takes it all the way down to a sliver of health. The Rock type uses Rock Slide and Lugia faints. Okay, that is a third ironic reset. We now have to add Giovanni to the list of Pokemon that Lugia has lost to. But there is potential for him to just use a guard spec on the Persian, and then he fails a Screech, so I knock it out for free. After that, I use Psychic successfully against both of the Nidos. Well done, I'm proud of myself. After that, Rhydon comes out, I go for Ice Beam. This time it rolls better damage and Giovanni's ace faints. Rival before the league, Ice Beam Sandslash, Ice Beam Execute, Thunderbolt, Cloyster, Psychic, 2-hit the Magneton. In this case, I get paralyzed by Thunder Wave. It's a little bit annoying, but I have Aeroblast for the following Kadabra, and the final Flareon is kinda bad as long as it doesn't trap me in Fire Spin. It does try to do this, but each attack is doing so little damage. Eventually, the Fire-type move is just too inconsistent, and the Flareon also chooses to go for Leer, and that gives me the opportunity to use one more Psychic, defeating the rival. After that battle, Lugia is almost level 44. So I battle one trainer inside of Victory Road, the cool trainer just by the entrance, to get up to level 44, and now I can use my rare candies. I've collected a total of 11, so I boost Lugia all the way up from level 44 up to level 55 before I'm ready to take on Lorelei. Okay, Ho-Oh's about to get into some problems because of my choices as a player. In Sylph, I pick up the TM for Earthquake and I teach this to it right away because I was like, this is a good move. I don't want Swift anymore. That move is trash. Well, at least trash compared to the other moves that Ho-Oh now has. Thunderbolt, Earthquake, Sacred Fire, and Psychic. This is a fantastic set. Obviously, I just steamroll the rival in Sylph. After that, Sabrina is simple because I have physical damage with Earthquake. I one-shot the Abra, two-shot the Kadabra. That's because she used the Next Defend. After that is Alakazam. It also sets up with Reflect, but then Ho-Oh gets a critical hit. Unlike with Lugia, where I refused to teach Earthquake, now Ho-Oh has it. So I critical hit the Ninetales, one-shotting Blaine's lead. Rapidash is faster than Ho-Oh, but it just fails a Growl, and then Earthquake takes it down to red health. It does successfully get a Growl in on the next turn before I knock it out. But for the Arcanine, I could just choose to use Psychic to deal special damage and avoid Reflex. But in this case, Ho-Oh gets a critical hit with Earthquake, bringing it down to red health right away. Then Arcanine misses a takedown, and I knock out Blaine's entire team for free. Now the problem I was mentioning right before Earthquake is the fact that I would like to teach Ho-Oh Mega Drain to take on Giovanni. But which move do I give up? I want to hold on to Thunderbolt for Lorelei. Sacred Fire is my same type attack bonus move. Letting go of Earthquake doesn't make sense when Agatha is coming up, and it would be nice to have Psychic for a particular hiker that I still have to face. After all, two of his Pokemon do have Rock type moves. Now in the moment, I wasn't really thinking things through here. These playthroughs go by very fast, much faster than all this footage that you're watching here. I slow it down to 50% footage speed before starting all of these edits, just to make it a little bit easier for all of you to watch. Anyway, my solution for Giovanni is not going to be to teach Mega Drain, instead to use rare candies with Ho-Oh, bringing it up from level 41 all the way to 50 before I take on the final gym leader. So will this solution work? Sacred Fire one-hits Dugtrio, Sacred Fire one-hits Persian, then Nidoqueen comes out. I have super effective damage with Earthquake, but it does not one-hit, giving the Nido the chance to use Thunder. Luckily, it misses. After that is Nidoking. I go for Psychic, trying to utilize my higher special stat, but this also does not one-hit. King successfully lands its Thunder, and this does massive damage, getting a critical hit. Ho-Oh is brought under half health before the Rhydon comes in. Here, I should have utilized the principle that I was mentioning before. Fire-type moves are super effective against Rock-type Pokemon in Generation 1. But instead, I actually fall for the super effective move using Earthquake. It does half damage to the Rhydon, which is decent, but not enough. As a result, Ho-Oh does not avoid the Rock Slide, and it takes its first reset here. This is entirely player error, and so is the next battle. I tried again with the same strategy. This time I get paralyzed by Thunder, so things spiral out of my control, and I don't even get to attack the Rhydon. So I'm stubborn. In this case, I just try again using Sacred Fire on the Rhydon. Remember, super effective damage. It does more than half, but it also burns, reducing the damage that Rhydon will deal. But it never gets a chance because Giovanni replaces its move with a guard spec. spec. Okay, we're going to continue using this fire-type super effective principle against the rival's Sandslash. In reality, it's actually neutral, but it does more than enough special damage to one-shot his lead. I burn away the Execute, zap the Cloyster, and finally crack the ground with Earthquake, one-shotting the final 3 Pokemon. No optional battles for Ho-Oh in Victory Road because it's exactly level 52. This is hopefully going to be enough for Ho-Oh going into the Elite Four because I have used all but 2 of my rare candies. Psych, for the Elite Four we are actually going to start with Lugia. This is another ironic moment. We're going up against Lorelei, who is an Ice Water type specialist. In this case, it seems like Lugia, a Water type Pokemon, would resist her moves. But in fact, as a Psychic Flying type, it is weak to her Ice type moves. I'm really bemoaning all of this because it just feels so wrong for Lugia to have all of these blue color schemes and be the guardian of the sea, and then like this battle it's technically weak against her. Although not really in practice, because Thunderbolt is fantastic against the majority of her Pokemon. And for the Jinx, I can just use Aeroblast. I was able to one-shot the Slowbro, which made me feel very confident against the final Lapras, but it's actually much more bulky. It has 220 HP and 120 special, whereas Slowbro has 175 HP and only 100 special. Thunderbolt fails to one-shot, so Lapras gets a Blizzard. In this case, it does under half and doesn't freeze. Bye-bye Lorelei. From there, we one-shot, 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 and even one-shot the Machamp. And then the spree continues. One-shot Gengar, one-shot Golbat, one-shot Haunter, one-shot Arbok, and one-shot the final Gengar. Okay, Lance, and this one is not going to be more difficult. I have Thunderbolt for the Gyarados, and then Ice Beam covers everything else. I one-shot both of the Dragonairs, one-shot even the Aerodactyl, and of course the Dragonite is a foregone conclusion. Lugia makes it to the champion with no issues. Sandslash goes down to a single Ice Beam. I have Aeroblast for the Alakazam. By the way, watch your eyes here because I did give it the Hyper Beam animation, which I absolutely love. I one-shot the Psychic type, move on to the Executor, which I can continue using Aeroblast against for super effective damage. This Grass type is usually so bulky, it survives almost everything, but it is not capable of surviving Lugia's Aeroblast. Alright, am I going to pay for my sins here? I have not taught Earthquake, and I have to face a Magneton. The Magneton. I choose Psychic, doing more than half, it lowers Special. Magneton chooses Thunderbolt, dealing pathetic damage to Lugia, and Psychic knocks it out on the next turn. I did not pay. Cloyster goes down to a single Thunderbolt, leaving only Flareon. It chooses Quick Attack, I use one last Aeroblast, and this finishes the champion's final Pokemon. In its first playthrough, Lugia gets a time of 43 minutes and 40 seconds with 3 resets, 0 blackouts, level 59 with a game time of 2 hours and 46 minutes. One more time, just for good measure, what were the resets? Brock, Blaine, and Giovanni. Absolutely wild. Anyway, let's see how Ho-Oh does during the league. If you look at the clock right when Lorelei is starting, you're going to see that the Fire-type Pokemon is going to have a hard time competing with Lugia. Also, Ho-Oh is a lower level here, so it is not able to one-shot the Dugong, wasting a little bit of extra time two-hitting. I do one-shot the Cloyster, the Slowbro, and the Jinx, but of course the Lapras also survives. This gives it a chance to use Hydro Pump, but the ridiculous special is enough for Ho-Oh to survive and take the win. Now, I mentioned a particular trainer who has Rock-type moves. It is this guy, his Onixes. They both have Rock Slide. They don't really like to use it though because he does not have good AI, and Psychic has more than enough special damage to one-shot every single one of his Pokemon. Just like with Lugia, Agatha is simple. This is the last time I'm going to be mentioning her in this video. There is no reason to worry about her, especially with Ho-Oh, which is also utilizing Earthquake here. It does even more damage when compared with Psychic just because it's physical. This is where things get a little bit more complicated. Lance is next. With most Fire-type Pokemon, he is an absolute wall because of his Gyarados that is his lead. But Ho-Oh has the solution. It knows Thunderbolt. That means the only Pokemon on his team that I'm really worried about is the first Dragonair using Thunder Wave. The reason is I'm going to teach Ho-Oh Mimic in the place of Psychic so that I can steal Ice Beam from the second Dragonair and sweep his final 3 Pokemon. So Thunderbolt one-hits the Gyarados. Next is Dragonair number 1. I'm going to use Earthquake against this thing, and unfortunately it chooses Thunder Wave. While I do make it to the next Dragonair, Mimic Ice Beam, and even get to the Aerodactyl, then it does a lot of damage with Fly followed by Swift, and the final Dragonite knocks Ho-Oh out. I think it probably makes the most sense to just reset if the first Dragonair uses Thunder Wave and paralyzes. Luckily in the next battle it uses Thunderbolt. but this move paralyzes. Pretty frustrating. Can I just get a critical hit with Earthquake already and knock it out in one turn? Well, no. And then it uses Thunder Wave again, giving Ho its third reset to Lance. By the way, things don't get better. I get Thunder Waved in the next battle. I decided to try to play it out, but this once again does not work out for me. Aerodactyl crits with Hyper Beam. In the next fight, Dragonair rolls Thunderbolt. Okay, finally. And this one once again paralyzes Ho-Oh. I did try for a third time to play the fight out, but once again, it ends in defeat, this time against the second Dragonair due to Bubble Beam and Paralysis. Okay, at some point, Thunderbolt is not going to inflict the secondary status condition, but it does, again, in the next battle. I can't believe this. This is actually some of the worst luck. Finally, at long last, Ho-Oh gets a critical hit with Earthquake. Dragonair faints, I mimic Ice Beam, and from there I sweep his remaining 3 Pokemon. This should have been an easy fight, at least I thought it was going to be. I have a 50-50 chance of it rolling Thunderbolt, and then only a 10% chance of it inflicting Paralysis. But apparently no, Ho-Oh needed to get a ton of resets here. Because this was so rocky, it has no chance of beating Lugia now in its first playthrough. With Ho-Oh, I have 2 leftover rare candies, so I use them now, bringing it up to level 57 before taking on the champion. Okay, so check this out. Sacred Fire on the Sandslash. I gave it the Fire Blast animation, by the way, because that's one of the coolest animations in the game. I think it's only slightly worse than the Hyper Beam animation. I thought that Earthquake was going to one-shot the following Alakazam, but it survives on a sliver, uses Psychic, deals massive damage with a critical hit, and Ho-Oh survives with just over half health remaining. Of course, Sacred Fire takes care of the Executor in one hit, and then it's time for the Magneton. Now, this thing is an absolute menace. I hate it so much. Check this out. Legendary Pokemon using Earthquake against the Magneton. And in this case, it survives on a sliver of health, uses Thunder Wave, paralyzes Ho-Oh so that it moves first on the next turn, using Thunderbolt, dealing massive damage, leaving me with only 26 hit points for the Cloyster, which of course outspeeds because of the status condition, uses Clamp and knocks Ho-Oh out. Okay, so can I roll the damage required to knock out the Alakazam in one hit? And the answer is yes, I can. Well, if Ho-Oh gets a critical hit. After that on the Magneton, will I be able to one hit with a better damage roll? And the answer is no. This time though, it chooses Thunderbolt. Please, not another scenario like Lance. I can't deal with that again. In this case, Thunderbolt does not paralyze, giving me another Earthquake, knocking the Magneton out, and then Cloyster falls to a single Thunderbolt. Alright, so that's it. Flareon is last. I go for Earthquake. It's pretty good against the Fire type, and I'm able to one-shot. Ho-Oh clocks in with a first playthrough time of 46 minutes and 40 seconds with 9 resets, 0 blackouts, level 58 with a game time of 2 hours and 47 minutes. As far as first playthroughs go with legendary Pokemon, this is okay, but I do just want to remind everyone, less than a month ago I played Espathra in Generation 1, and it was able to get a sub 40 minute time on its first playthrough. That's better than both Lugia and Ho-Oh were able to do here. That said, I do think these two have great potential for their follow-up runs. I'm going to start with Ho-Oh, and this run is mostly minimum battles, with a few extra trainers thrown in for some key damage ranges. Fighting Brock at a low level with Ho-Oh is no problem, as I demonstrated before. Once we get to Cerulean City, fighting the rival first makes the most sense, but I think I make a mistake because I once again chose to go to the SS Anne. This doesn't seem like the optimal play, especially after reviewing damage ranges, so let's go through them. When backtracking from the SS Anne, doing no additional training, starting Misty at level 21, I will have a 2-hit against the Staryu using Gust. That's with Gust. I don't even have to use Sacred Fire. Then I can use Sacred Fire against the Starmie, which has a 90% chance to 3-shot. If you look at Bubble Beam's damage, it only does between 25 and 30% damage. So this is a pretty confident win for Ho-Oh, provided the Starmie doesn't get a critical hit. The thing to really consider here though is the number of trainers that I'm fighting for experience going to the SS Anne. It really isn't that many. I can fight the Rocket before Misty and then just loop around over the ledge to her gym. So the only trainers that I'm fighting on the SS Anne are the 2 trainers before Vermilion City, Sandy and the guy with Raticate, then the Gentleman who blocks the rare candy, and finally the rival. That's only 4 additional trainers. So fighting Misty before going to Vermilion City gives Ho-Oh level 19. In this case, I can 2-shot the Staryu using Sacred Fire, and then I still have an 87.2% chance to 3-hit the Starmie using this move. Bubble Beam's power is increased to 31 to 38%, and that's that's a little bit scary if you consider the fact that Starmie is moving first against Ho-Oh. But I can just use Thunder Wave, solve the speed problem, and potentially take less hits from Bubble Beam. Overall, I think I simply made the wrong choice here. Also, I really want to show everyone this Surge fight because it's absolutely hilarious. Turn 1, Sacred Fire burns the Raichu, lowering its attack. Then turn 2, he uses Mega Kick, getting a critical hit, knocking Ho-Oh out. I did take the reset, I fought Surge again. This time, Ho-Oh pulls through, and now we're going to speed up into the mid-game. Here's another disappointing fact about this run. Once again in Sylph, I decided to go for the moveset Sacred Fire, Earthquake, Psychic, and Thunderbolt. This leaves me with very little choices against Giovanni, and I essentially just didn't solve the fight. I was like, I'm just going to Sacred Fire the Rhydon, and hopefully he'll use a Guard Spec, miss with Rock Slide, or I'll get a burn. Now, I'm going to be honest with everyone, I was rushing when completing this playthrough. I was so worried about the amount of work that I had to do for Daily December, and this run you're watching right now is my third playthrough with Ho-Oh. So I had already spent roughly 2 to 3 hours thinking about this Pokemon and working on it by the time this footage was being recorded. I knew that I had to optimize Lugia as well, plus doing all of the post-production on this video, recording voiceover, all of that stuff. So I think I was making some bad choices because of my own internal time constraints. And coming back to this run after seeing myself reset to Giovanni once here, knowing that Mega Drain will one-shot the Rhydon, I am really not satisfied with this run. So I am going to go back and do a 4th playthrough. Yes, I am still panicked about Daily December, but I think all of you deserve me at my best. That said, let's just watch how this one plays out. I have 2 resets to Lorelei, which is really frustrating. Again, not a great result for Ho-Oh, and you can see that its time is much better this time going into the league. Luckily though, I get through Lance on my first attempt, so no problems with the first Dragonair this time around, and I don't really have a solution for it. I thought about mimicking Hyper Beam from the Gyarados so that I have a 90% chance to one-hit both of the Dragonairs. Then things get tricky at the Dragonite because Thunderbolt has a 3-hit, and that's just not good enough when the Dragonite can use moves like Blizzard or Hyper Beam. Remember, Ho-Oh does not resist Blizzard in Generation 1. And the Ice-type move has 90% accuracy plus a 10% chance to freeze. Also, Ho-Oh's damage ranges at level 55 are not quite good enough for me to feel comfortable using Thunderbolt followed by Hyper Beam to knock out the Dragonite in 2 turns. Plus, Hydro Pump from the Gyarados does between 42 and 49% damage. That means I'll have only half health remaining by the time Dragonite comes in. If it attacks twice, Ho-Oh is going to lose. So I still think the Mimic Ice Beam strategy is better, but it's a little bit unfortunate that you're exposed to Thunder Wave resets from the first Dragonair. This time against the champion, Ho-Oh doesn't have any problems, and it clocks in with the time of 40 minutes and 49 seconds with 4 resets, 0 blackouts at level 58, with a game time of 2 hours and 35 minutes. Okay, I'm gonna finish this audio once I finish another playthrough with Ho-Oh, so wish me luck. I think I can do much better in the late game using Mega Drain. Haha, the joke's on me, because when I came back and did this playthrough, I accidentally tossed Mega Drain to get more bag space. I'm not really used to using this move with most Pokemon, so I guess bad habits die hard, and in this case, Ho-Oh is also going to at Giovanni's Rhydon. Well, that's actually not the case, because before I went into this run, I was contemplating using a different strategy against him anyway, so I can just revert to that and this playthrough is still going to be fine. Before we do that though, I want to talk through a few things in Ho-Oh's early game, specifically around Nugget Bridge. This is by far the worst part of the playthrough for Ho-Oh, and I think overall this section of the game is the biggest thing holding Ho-Oh back from having a truly exceptional time. The fact of the matter is Ho-Oh just doesn't really want to be using Gust, it wants to be using Sacred Fire all the time. But then I constantly have to go back to the Pokemon Center to replenish my PP before continuing with the density of mandatory trainers. Now, as I was mentioning before, I am going to do Misty before going to Vermilion City in this playthrough, and overall, this is so much better. I'm still going to 2-hit the Staryu, and I'm going to 3-hit the Starmie with Sacred Fire. Even if I miss, there's still the potential for Ho-Oh to win here because I'm using Thunder Wave. In this particular run, I pull through on my first attempt. Okay, let's talk optional battles in this run. There are only 3, and each one of them that I added in is specifically so that I can pick up a rare candy. The first one of these is the Gentleman on the SS Anne, and then later in the playthrough I fight the Rocket in the hideout to get the rare candy here, as well as Machoke candy in Sylph. Before I get to him though, I fight 2 gym leaders, Erica and then Koga. Because of type effectiveness, Ho-Oh has no issues against them. Then I made a mistake. I used my rare candies here at level 32, going up to 39, but that doesn't make a lot of sense. I was doing this just to block wild encounters in Pokemon Mansion. I should have gone to Sylph first first and leveled up slightly higher with the mandatory trainers there. Either way, this has no impact on the playthrough. If anything, it sped up my results. I go to Sylph, stomp absolutely everyone here, crush Sabrina, and then take on Blaine. Now at this moment in the run, you're probably thinking, Scott, you're making the same mistake again. Thunderbolt, Psychic, Earthquake, and Sacred Fire. What are you going to drop before Giovanni to get a different strategy? And the answer is, I'm going to get rid of Sacred Fire. Earthquake and Psychic are good against the majority of Giovanni's Pokemon, and I'm going to teach Mimic in Sacred Fire's place so that I can steal Double Team on the Persian and Setup. This is what most fire Pokemon have to do in order to get decent results in Yellow version, so I'm kind of shameless about using it here with Ho-Oh once again. And this brings us to a good point. I am not able to one-hit either the Nidoqueen or the Nidoking if I'm using the Mega Drain strategy to one-hit the Rhydon. That means both the Nidoqueen and the Nidoking have a chance to use Thunder. Giovanni could instead use a Guard Spec, he is sponsored by them, but if he does use Thunder and successfully paralyze Ho-Oh, then Rhydon will move first and use Rock Slide, knocking me out. So in the end, I actually think that the Double Team strategy is a little bit superior here rather than using Mega Drain. So Sean, maybe we should go back and just take out that part of voiceover where I said I tossed Mega Drain. That was part of the plan this entire time. From here, despite Ho-Oh being very low leveled and having used most of its rare candies, it's gonna kind of just steamroll the end of the game. The rival before the league really has no Pokemon that can threaten me. You'll notice here against Execute, I'm having to knock it out over 3 turns with moves like Psychic and Earthquake. It could potentially paralyze me, I guess, but beyond that, I'm gonna one-shot his 4 remaining Pokemon, so I don't really care. Plus, I want to hold on to Mimic because it's really helpful against Lorelei. I can steal Amnesia, set up once, and then knock out her Lapras in one hit, avoiding Hydro Pump, and the potential for her to get stray critical hits. Then against Lance, hopefully the Dragonair will not paralyze me. This time around, it goes for Thunderbolt, and it doesn't get the status condition. Because of that, on the second Dragonair, I can mimic Ice Beam and then hopefully win. Although, it chooses Bubble Beam and gets the 33% chance to lower my speed stat. So now Aerodactyl and Dragonite are both going to attack Ho-Oh. That said, its high special stat means that I survive the Dragonite's hit, use Ice Beam, and Lance is defeated. It was a close call, but to this point, Ho-Oh still has 0 resets. And if you look at the clock, it is about to get an absolutely amazing time. Although there's a bit of a problem for the champion, I have to be able to defeat his Sandslash quickly. So this is why giving up Sacred Fire doesn't matter, because I can just teach Fire Blast in its place, and this still allows me to one-shot the Sandslash, provided I don't miss on the first turn. Luckily it didn't go for Slash, I knock it out. Then from there, I one-hit the Alakazam, one-hit the Executor using Fire Blast, one-hit the Magneton using Earthquake, although this is only a 30% chance. Beyond that, Cloyster and Flareon both fall, and Ho-Oh clocks in with a 4th playthrough time of 38 minutes and 20 seconds, with 0 resets and blackouts, at level 55 with a game time of 2 hours and 32 minutes. Now, before I move on to Lugia's follow-up run, I really want to emphasize the fact that Ho-Oh did this on minimum battles plus 3 trainers. This was an incredibly tight playthrough. And I also had no resets, so there was no bad luck slowing me down. On the other hand, Lugia in its follow-up playthrough is going to fight 8 optional trainers. Some of these I do think make a lot of sense, but I do believe that I could cut some of them out of the route for Lugia and make it go slightly faster. The first trainers that I really stand by fighting are in the early game. I take on the second Bug Catcher who has 2 Metapod and 1 Caterpie, and then the Yellow version exclusive Bug Catcher who has 2 Pokemon. The reason I don't fight more trainers in Viridian Forest is because I don't need them and I don't want to run out of PP on Aeroblast. Defeating a bunch of Pokemon with Gust is just going to be slow going. Then the third optional trainer in the early game is the junior trainer inside of Brock's gym. This levels Lugia up to 9, and then with critical hits, Aeroblast does between 38 and 45% damage to Geodude every turn. And it's going to do 22 to 28% damage to Onix. I'm hoping that all 5 hits land. If they don't, I'm going to restart and save time because it doesn't make sense to knock out his Pokemon using Gust after only 4 Aeroblasts. Inside Mount Moon, I take on the 4th optional trainer, which is the Hiker. I figured Water Gun makes him so fast, why wouldn't I battle him? Although, if I was going back to do this again, I think I would cut him out of the route because he's kind of unnecessary. And even the smallest amounts of time saves really do matter when you're using a Pokemon that's this good. The next 2 optional trainers are in the SSN. The first one is to get the Body Slam TM. I think this could be cut from the route, it's not entirely necessary. The Gentleman, on the other hand, to get the rare candy, I think just makes sense because you're gaining a level by fighting him, plus getting a little bit of experience. And he doesn't take long because his Pokemon are weak to Bubble Beam. Okay, so Ho-Oh's run was very clean. And Lugia's, on the other hand, is not really stacking up to be that way, because Surge ends up giving it a reset. I would have restarted this run if I had got more than that, but with only one, it's not a huge time deficit, so I'm going to push forward with Lugia and see what it can do. Believe me, this is all building towards something, I promise. Throughout Rock Tunnel, I run Aeroblast, Body Slam, Thunderbolt, and Bubble Beam. And then Body Slam becomes Ice Beam, and Bubble Beam becomes Psychic for the mid-game. I could probably cut out the Rocket Hideout entirely from this playthrough. If I went back in and tried again, I definitely would do that. The guy guarding the poster is the 7th and second last optional trainer that I'm going to fight in this entire playthrough. After defeating Erica, then in Sylph, I take on the guy for the Machoke candy, and that's it. After defeating the Arbok trainer, I use 7 rare candies to bring Lugia up to level 38 before fighting the rival. I think these damage ranges demonstrate just how good Lugia is. 1 hit on the Sandslash, 1 hit on the Cloyster, 2 hit on the Magneton, oh no, then 1 hit on the Kadabra and 1 hit on the Flareon. This thing is really dominant. Next I go to Koga. Psychic 1 hits all of his Pokemon with the exception of Venomoth, which I can use Aeroblast to one-shot. Aeroblast then 1 hits all of Sabrina's Pokemon. And now for Blaine, I am going to emphasize the fact that I don't want to teach Surf. Having it hang around for the late game just doesn't make a ton of sense when Lugia doesn't need it. Also, opening the inventory to teach another move isn't always the best call because it wastes time. In the case of Ho-Oh, if I taught Mega Drain for Giovanni, then I would have taught Mimic for Lorelei, and this would have been 2 moves taught, doubling the amount of frames spent on that action. So for Lugia here against Blaine, I don't think I need to teach another move. Before Giovanni, I use 3 rare candies. These do help with damage ranges, so look here, Aeroblast against Persian has a 65% chance to one-hit when I'm at level 44. But after using the rare candies, it jumps up to 94.6% chance, which is a guarantee provided I get a critical hit. And there's only a 1 in 256 chance that that's not going to happen. From there, one-hit all of the rivals Pokemon except the Magneton, which I have to 2-hit. With both of these 2 Pokemon, I don't really care if I get hit by Thunder Wave, because even if the Kadabra or the Flareon attack me, I'm just gonna shrug off their efforts because my special stat is so ridiculous. For Lugia, I didn't teach Mimic for Lorelei because it's not solving other problems. It would literally only solve this fight, and I feel like that's a waste of time. I have to go into Copycat's house, pick up the TM, then teach it, and then unlearn it later on for a move like Blizzard, which would require me to pick up another TM, wasting even more time to text. Lugia has Thunderbolt and Ice Beam for Lance. What more do I need to say? Before the champion, I'm going to teach Earthquake in the place of Psychic. Now, I'm going to admit that I was playing this second Lugia playthrough fairly emotionally. I think I threw in too many optional trainers that I didn't need to fight. And I also picked up Earthquake just on a whim, thinking it would do more damage to the Magneton, when that isn't really true. It is doing more damage, but the turns to knockout are still likely going to be 2, and Psychic would do pretty much the exact same thing. In this case, Lugia could potentially save time, skipping the Machoke candy guy, not getting that candy, and also skipping the Earthquake TM, which would save learning time here right before the champion. Now, why am I drawing attention to all of these inefficiencies in my playthrough? Well, look up at the clock right now while I'm fighting the champion. His Magneton paralyzes me and then knocks Lugia out. That is a second reset. But even with the second reset, I come in, this time Earthquake is able to 2-shot the Magneton, it goes for Thunderbolt instead of Thunder Wave, and then I knock out the Cloyster as well as the Flareon at the end of the battle, and Lugia clocks in with a final third playthrough time of 36 minutes and 5 seconds, with 2 resets. 0 blackouts at level 55, with a game time of 2 hours and 20 minutes. Okay, did anyone just catch that? With 8 optional trainers, 2 resets, and some moveset inefficiency, Lugia was able to get the top spot in my current tier list. Yes, this time is faster than Victory Bell. I'm sure a lot of you are going to want me to go back and play another Lugia run just to see how low its time can go. I'm not going to do that today. I will do it later when someone eventually beats Lugia's time, because I think there are some contenders, even within the original 151 Pokemon. That said, for now, Lugia has nothing else to prove. So far, it is the top dog in Pokemon Yellow. Even with a not perfect run, it is 22 seconds faster than Victory Bell's 36 minute and 27 second time. I'm really glad I went back and did more work with Ho-Oh because I was able to get it into the S tier with its final result. It earns itself the spot right in the middle of the tier by 2 other legendary birds, Zapdos and Articuno. But in this case, the the fire type is just behind both of them. Once again, Kanto really does not like this typing. But if we think about this type pairing and compare Ho-Oh with Moltres, then we can see that Ho-Oh is significantly better. That said, just wait for Charizard. Maybe, just maybe, it can get a better result than Ho-Oh. Here are the 2 run summaries for Ho-Oh and Lugia. If you want to do these runs yourselves, I have left the patches at the Discord link in the description. If you support me on Patreon or through YouTube memberships, thank you so much. It really does mean the world to me. Now, if you've made it this far, you are going to witness me not forget to do the Oak voiceover. Just so everyone's not confused, I recorded Ho-Oh's Oak battle after the 3rd run rather than after my 4th playthrough result. This isn't going to change things too much because Ho-Oh doesn't really struggle here. The Arcanine isn't very good, and then it just has to luck out against the Blastoise and the Gyarados, hoping that they both don't go for Hydro Pump. At level 55, which is higher than my final finish, I am not able to one-shot the Blastoise, so it has a chance to use this move, but the Gyarados, which takes 4 times damage, even though it's level 70, doesn't survive. Lugia, on the other hand, has a good matchup against pretty much all of Oak's teams. It has super effective damage against Blastoise, Charizard, and Venusaur. I went up against the Blastoise team because it's the most defensive of the 3, but still, Lugia just crushes all of these high-level Pokemon. Okay, now, if you've made it this far, you're incredible. I'll see you in tomorrow's video when Daily December continues.